The spacecraft Odyssey 1 is journeying to Saturn's moon Titan, where they need to gather natural resources for Earth. Since the voyage spans several years, the crew usually enters hibernation and only wakes up every 90 days to conduct routine checks and maintenance, ensure the ship is on course, and communicate with Earth. After 9 months, John awakens to the familiar alerts from the A1, cautioning him about the potential disorientation and nausea caused by the hibernation medication. Despite his attempts to recover, Captain Franks urges him to start working. Following a quick shower, John joins Franks and Nash to inspect the system. They receive a holiday greeting from Earth and a reminder to undergo their psychological evaluation. Although John checks his private inbox, he is disappointed to find no messages. During his psych evaluation, John thinks about his girlfriend Zoe. When asked what he misses the most, he unexpectedly responds with fresh air.
What is the thing you miss most about
Fresh
home?
air.
He reavels to Nash that he has forgotten Zoe's last name. Still, Nash reassures him that it's a common occurrence after awakening. As John continues his maintenance tasks, he reminisces about the day he met Zoe at a party, which helps him recall her last name.
Get you a drink, I'll tell you about it. Hey, John, would you like some?
Morgan.
Feeling more at ease, John and the team send a message to Earth, confirming everything is in order before returning to their hibernation pods. As John drifts off to sleep, he recollects the day he encountered Zoe for the second time during a presentation about the Titan mission. The presentation showcased the ship's slingshot maneuver around Jupiter to propel them towards Titan, where the resources found would be utilized as clean energy for Earth to combat the environmental damage caused by humans. The next time John awakens, he ensures he eats well and engages in some exercise. While working, he hears a voice calling his name and begins to follow it but finds nothing. Suddenly, the ship starts shaking and turning, and the lights flicker. The AI issues a warning message before John observes some screws falling from the ceiling, causing a panel to shake. When he reaches out to touch it, the panel falls and hits him on the head, rendering him unconscious. John dreams of a weeping Zoe before waking up to find Franks and Nash checking on him. They inform him that they are unaware of what happened to the ship because he was only awake when the incident occurred. Upon inspecting the hole left by the fallen panel, John discovers that various internal components of the ship have incurred extensive damage. Subsequently, the astronauts examined the exterior video feeds and noticed damage to part of the hull. However, they cannot find the moment of impact on the recordings, and Earth did not send any error messages. They reset the power in the system, but everything appears to be functioning normally. Franks decides to reassess the damage while John records a message for Houston to explain the situation. While doing so, he reminisces about his subsequent meeting with Zoe at a cafe and how she assisted him with a video game level on which he was stuck. They ended up conversing a lot, and John revealed how he had no relatives, which was why he had a good chance of being selected to go to Titan. Currently, Franks emphasizes that since everything is functioning well and there doesn't appear to be any peril for the crew, they should proceed with the mission as planned, Nash saying it's too early to determine. Consequently, Franks starts contemplating the possibility of the ship experiencing structural strain that led to decompression. John refuses to believe it since Zoe is one of the designers. Still, Nash latches on to the idea, stating that this could result in an explosion during the slingshot maneuver. Franks instructs them to work on repairs while assuming structural strain is the issue, and once again announces they'll proceed as usual until they receive word from Earth. While working, John keeps reminiscing about Zoe and the evening he visited her at her home to finally be intimate for the first time. He's suddenly roused by Nash, who still believes flying on a damaged ship is a terrible idea and that they should abort the mission. At that moment, the lights and screens flicker for a few seconds and quickly return to normal. Nash runs diagnostics, but there's no indication of power failure. They're interrupted by Frank summoning them to his office, revealing he overheard their conversation. He emphasizes that they'll be in significant trouble if they return to Earth. Houston confirms there's nothing wrong with the ship. Franks reminds them they must collaborate and send them back to their pods. John starts getting ready and recalls the morning after with Zoe, who suggested they should be friends with benefits because he could be leaving soon. Nash approaches John again and suggests that instead of choosing 90 days of sleep, he should set 89 days and 12 hours. That way they can wake up before Franks and execute the slingshot in the opposite direction to return to Earth. However, John refuses, stating that this is a mutiny. A desperate Nash shares the story of a facility in Antarctica where the crew found a crack in the ice shelf that was making its way toward the station. They desired to evacuate, but their leader brandished his firearm and warned that he would shoot anyone attempting to depart. When the rescuers arrived later, the leader was missing, and the rest of the team had perished from gunshot wounds to the head. Ultimately, John relents and agrees to assist Nash, but only if they discover proof of further damage upon awakening. As he rests with the new timer, John reflects on his final months on Earth and how he would privately share pleasant moments with Zoe, but maintain a professional demeanor during discussions about Titan. Upon awakening next, he thinks he sees Zoe aboard the ship, but it turns out to be a hallucination. Shortly after, Nash checks on him. John says he's experiencing illusions, citing it as another reason to return home. The pair heads to the bridge and finds no communication from Earth. They admire the beauty of Jupiter for a while. John declares that he doesn't want to adhere to Nash's plan due to lack of evidence, sparking a dispute. Their conversation is interrupted by Franks, who overhears their plan and instructs his pod to awaken early. He dispatches Nash to work, and when Nash attempts to object, Frank whispers something in his ear that prompts him to leave the room. Subsequently, Frank inquires if he and John are friends and shares a drink with him. He also pledges that he will immediately terminate the mission if concrete evidence of danger is discovered. Meanwhile, Nash paces nervously in the kitchen. When John enters to have a meal, Nash begins to harass him and seek support. John declines, and Nash becomes agitated, ranting about the ship's damage as Franks arrives. The captain wants to know if they can proceed without Nash. Because the calculations are on the computer, John confirms that they can. So Frank seizes Nash and informs him that he will report his insubordination to Houston before escorting him away. Later, John goes through his day while reminiscing about Zoe, to the extent that he needs to take a break to brood in a dimly lit room. Eventually, he returns to the damaged panel affixed to the ceiling. John enters the aperture and discovers numerous sparking cables. Suddenly, a device begins to malfunction, emitting numerous sparks and dislodging all its screws. Subsequently, the damaged section of the opening ruptures, and John struggles to hold on as space attempts to pull him out. Still, he lacks the strength, and his body drifts into the void. At that moment, he wakes up and realizes it was a hallucination. Frank announces that it's time to execute the slingshot, and Nash implores John not to proceed, but he disregards him. As he heads to the bridge, John reminisces about when he and Zoe conversed about moths and their instinct to fly towards light. Soon, Franks and John are at the controls while Nash can only observe. After numerous calculations and preparations, they activate the thrusters, and the ship circumnavigates Jupiter. Suddenly, the AI reports a system overload, yet Frank instructs John to continue. Inside the panel aperture, the unit continues to emit sparks. As the ship trembles violently, it completes its orbit around Jupiter. John activates the button, releasing the slingshot just in time. The maneuver is a success, and the ship stabilizes with the system confirming they're on track to Titan. After celebrating with a beverage, John exercises more, followed by maintenance work. He checks the radio and hears an unusual sound, so he puts his ear closed and is surprised by a voice calling his name. John! He takes the radio to the other astronauts, who deny using the comms. It could have been an echo, but the radar shows nothing for 1,000 miles. Nash believes it was another illusion, and Franks announces it's time to go back to sleep. This time, John dreams about receiving a call confirming his selection for the mission. However, when he told Zoe, she didn't seem pleased. She admitted she broke their agreement and fell in love with him. Still, John only replied this was more important than their relationship. A hurt Zoe confesses she voted against him because she didn't want him to go. So John dropped his key and left. The next time John wakes up, he feels dizzier than usual. He moves around the ship to clear his mind, but can't stop thinking about Zoe. When she suddenly appears nearby, John follows her, repeating that it's just in his head. He's stopped by Franks, who tells him Nash found something in the reactor room and needs help. Franks is concerned about John's health, and John snaps, yelling about the hibernation being torture. He calms down quickly and swears he's fine, but Frank still reminds him that Zoe isn't on the ship. Then John joins Nash, who explains that the reactor output is escalating. It appears minor, but they must stop it from worsening, or they won't finish the trip. Nash admits he isn't feeling well, so he asks John to double-check his numbers before presenting them to the captain. John uses the chance to ask Nash why Franks knew he was hallucinating Zoe, and Nash swears he didn't say anything, only to have a breakdown as he doubts his own memories. Nash confesses he can't remember his parents' names or faces. John attempts to reassure him that it's simply the side effects of the medication. Still, Nash begins prodding at his recollections of Zoe and suggests she may have found someone new. John pushes him away as Nash makes strange noises, only for him to claim they can still turn back. His frustration intensifies, and John becomes more forceful as he instructs him to be quiet, revealing that there are no numbers on the screen because Nash imagines them all. Frank summons them to the control room, but Nash still reports something amiss with the numbers. Frank displays the screens and confirms the anomaly they must rectify to reach Titan safely. He also discloses that someone issued a low-level command to the reactor to deliberately cause these irregularities. The most recent login is for John, but Frank suspects it was Nash using John's password. Suddenly, Frank retrieves a firearm and declares they are returning to hibernation.
Right now, I'm ordering the both of you into hibernation while I weigh my options. That can be arranged.
While John enters his pod, he is shocked to see Frank striking Nash with the gun. They grapple for the weapon, and Nash is pushed against John's pod as Frank begins striking his head with the firearm. John is unable to witness the conclusion because he falls asleep. This time, he dreams of the evening before the journey when he visits Zoe to bid farewell. She apologized for everything and wondered if he ever loved her, but he again evaded the question. The next time John awakens, he feels more unwell than ever. He vomits as images of Frank killing Nash flash before him. Before drifting off to sleep, Frank had inquired if they were still friends. John searches for the others and fails to locate anyone until Frank startles him. The captain explains that Nash is too unstable, so he renders him unconscious and locks him in the pod until they reach Titan. He still has a gun in his hand because he believes John may soon lose control. When John insists he's fine, Frank explains that Nash's account of the Antarctica base had been incorrect. The commander had instructed the crew to depart. Still, they were too frightened, and the wounds found during the autopsy had actually been self-inflicted. Frank announces that the mission is still underway and sends John to work. While inspecting the system, John feels something unusual and checks his arm to discover that his veins have turned dark. Suddenly, his arm begins to change, and he cries out in agony as his veins burst. However, this is also a hallucination. At that moment, John hears voices calling his name again, but no one is nearby. Then John goes to the kitchen, and Frank mentions his hand is trembling before telling about Zoe, but John tells him to stay out of his life. Frank decides to reveal the truth, as John has never had a relationship with Zoe. She just kept approaching him in public spaces because the committee sent her to keep an eye on his mental health before the mission. John freaks out and can't understand how Frank can list all the occasions John met Zoe with eerie precision. So Frank points out he was on the committee too. Refusing to believe him, John walks away to work on the radio maintenance. He still thinks about Zoe, starting to doubt his memories now.
And every day I wake up and I'm excited and I'm inspired.
It's the most important job you'll ever have.
And my sister jokes that it's my longest relationship.
At that moment, someone from Houston contacts him through the radio and asks many questions, but they can't hear John's answers and hang up. Then Franks calls him to the bridge and scolds him for believing he could contact Earth this far away. He plays the security footage to prove John had been talking alone and gets him to calm down by showing him how far they've come into space. Refusing to be sent to hibernation again, John walks to another room and locks the door before Franks can follow him, demanding to see Nash. Franks says he can't interrupt the sleep cycle and promises to take John to see him. However, as soon as John opens the door, Franks pushes him against the wall and then to the ground, threatening to kill him if he doesn't go to sleep. Remembering what happened to Nash, John attacks Franks to disarm him and starts beating him up. A fight ensues as both men try to reach the gun. Next, John grabs the gun and asks about Nash, only for Frank to laugh. Feeling like he's losing it, John wanders around the ship as memories flash before him, and Frank's voice haunts him. John is disoriented and bewildered, not knowing what is real anymore. So Franks takes advantage of the situation to attack him again. A new altercation ensues, and John fractures Frank's nose before striking him with the gun, rendering him unconscious. Subsequently, John proceeds to the bridge and utilizes the cameras to search for Nash, but to no avail. Franks reappears behind him, and John pushes him off before vehemently assaulting him until Franks passed out. Following this, John inquires about Nash's whereabouts from the A1, and the AI informs him that Nash is alive on the bridge. A perplexed John requests the crew manifest and discovers that the crew consists of only one person, himself. His full name is John Franks Nash, and he has been experiencing hallucinations of the other two astronauts all this time. Upon realizing that he is alone, John experiences a breakdown and contemplates self-deletion. However, instead, he proceeds to the radio and attempts to contact Earth. To his shock, Zoe responds. Uncertain of her reality, he confides in her about the other astronauts, admitting that he may be losing his grip on reality. Zoe explains that he has been inadvertently administered a larger dose of medication, leading to his hallucinations. She also confirms that he is the sole crew member and discloses a startling revelation. The ship never departed. John had fallen asleep before the launch and was placed in a training facility in New Mexico. A flawless replica of the ship was constructed and positioned 1,000 feet underground to evaluate the effects of hibernation and isolation on the human psyche. Zoe asserts that she was unaware of this and would not have allowed it to occur. John mentions observing Jupiter during the slingshot, but Zoe clarifies that it was all part of a simulation. An earthquake caused the damage to the hull and the panel, which explains why he did not observe anything on camera. That earthquake severed all communications, preventing Zoe from warning him about the medication. Now that everything has been revealed, Zoe instructs him to proceed through the airlock to locate the tunnel. John promptly prepares to leave, only for Franks to materialize again and warn him against doing so. Franks insists that the conversation with Zoe was a genuine hallucination, as John's mind desperately sought an explanation that would rationalize the situation. However, John refuses to accept that Franks is real and opens the airlock, expressing his desire to return home. Franks walks away, and John professes his love for Zoe before the AI opens the final door. Upon stepping outside, he encounters an underground tunnel and catches sight of the artificial ship above him. The area trembles as John hears voices assuring him of rescue and machines excavating the ground. He ascends a ladder and calls out to signal his location. At that moment, a light flickers, and when John touches it, he recalls the Moth's discussion about light. Unfortunately, it turns out that he is in space, and his body is ejected into the void.